They said they'd come get me after the reception, so I waited at the bus stop. There are moments in life when the air shifts, not with sound, but with silence. That evening, I sat on a metal bench near the corner of Willow and Ninth, just a few blocks from the wedding venue. My shoes pinched at the toes, my hands curled over a paper-wrapped box on my lap. Inside was the family shawl, ivory lace hand tatted by my grandmother in 1929. 3 generations of women in my family had worn it over their wedding dresses. I had brought it carefully packed in a cedar-lined case tied with blue ribbon. I'd imagined handing it to my daughter before the ceremony. I imagined her eyes softening, her voice cracking. "Mom, you kept this. All this time." But that didn't happen. None of it did. Instead, after the photos and the last-minute touch-ups, Rachel pulled me aside. Her voice bright, distracted, like someone trying to keep too many balloons from floating away. "Hey, Mom," she said. "We're heading out with the photographer for some sunset shots up the hill. Just head to the bus stop on 9th, okay? We'll come grab you after the reception." I blinked. "The bus stop?" "Yeah," she smiled. "It's shaded. There's a bench. You'll be comfy. Just give us a couple of hours." She kissed my cheek, light as air, already turning away before I could reply. And just like that, the mother of the bride was dismissed to the curb. I remember thinking, surely this is just a mix-up. Surely someone will come running out to say, "Sorry, Mom, silly us, come with us in the van." But no one did. I walked slowly to the corner. My dress, a dusky rose tea-length with a chiffon overlay, fluttered lightly in the breeze. I had chosen it weeks ago with care. Not flashy, not frumpy. Just enough grace to say I still belong. Have you ever sat somewhere and known deep in your chest that you weren't meant to be there? Not because you didn't want to be, but because someone else didn't want you. That was me on that bench. I sat upright, hands folded neatly, shawl still on my lap. The gift envelope zipped in my handbag, a small check and a silver locket engraved with initials. Not much, but chosen with thought. Time passed slowly. Shadows shifted. The laughter from the venue faded into the distant hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a dog behind a chain-link fence. I checked my phone twice. No messages. I didn't want to believe it. I kept thinking maybe they got busy. Maybe they'd send someone else. Maybe they didn't mean it this way. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't a lapse. It was a decision. And worse than that, it wasn't new. This wasn't the first time I'd been asked to wait outside the edges of my own daughter's life. It wasn't the first time. There was that Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the one Rachel forgot to invite me to until the night before. "Oh, didn't I tell you," she'd said on the phone. "We're going to Greg's parents. But don't worry, we'll FaceTime you in." And I had smiled through that call like a fool, a tray of cornbread muffins cooling behind me, still warm in the pan. Then there was Clara's dance recital. I found out about it from a Facebook post the next day. She had been wearing the dress I helped pay for. Front row was full of Rachel's in-laws, all smiles and praise. Me. I watched the video alone at midnight, with the sound turned low and a lump in my throat. At first, I told myself it was just modern life, busy schedules, miscommunications. But miscommunications don't repeat themselves like clockwork. They don't sting in the same exact spot every time. I sat straighter on that bench as the street lamps flickered on. The sun had dipped behind the buildings. Now, leaving the sidewalk bathed in gray. Still no call. Still no car. Still no Rachel. A young couple passed me the girl holding a bouquet of roses. I heard her giggle. "Your mom's gonna cry when she sees these." He laughed and kissed her temple. I smiled faintly, but it faded fast. That used to be Rachel's arms full of daisies she picked from the neighbor's yard, handing them to me like treasures. "For you, Mommy. Because you look tired." Where had that child gone? And more painfully, what had I done to be forgotten so easily? My stomach churned, but not from hunger. No, it was something else. Something older, deeper. Like a truth that had been trying to surface for years and finally broke through. This wasn't about a ride. This wasn't about the bench. This was about being seen as disposable. And I had allowed it. Not once. Not twice. But over decades. I'd babysat at the drop of a hat. I'd paid for private school tuition when Greg's freelance work got tight. I'd filled their fridge during hard months. I'd even co-signed their second car loan, a Lexus, not a necessity. And every time I told myself it was love. Because mothers do that, don't they? We give without question. We bend, we shrink, we wait. But what no one tells you is if you keep shrinking eventually, you disappear. My phone buzzed. I snatched it up with trembling hands. A message from Rachel. 5 words. "We'll call you tomorrow. Promise." No greeting, no apology. Just like the day before, just like every day before that. I stared at the screen as my thumb hovered. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Tomorrow was just another way of saying not today. I stood up slowly, brushing the back of my skirt. My knees ached. My heart ached more. I walked away from the bench without looking back. A woman can only sit in waiting for so long before she decides the bus isn't coming and starts walking. I didn't go back to the bus stop. Not the next morning. Not ever. Instead, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still wearing the same dusky rose dress, still smelling faintly of someone else's celebration, and opened the small travel bag I'd tucked beneath my clothes. Inside, it wasn't makeup or slippers. It was a folder, a thick one, marked with a single name in cursive ink, Rachel. Not because I was a dramatic record keeper, not because I expected anything in return. I kept it because over the years I'd learned that memory lies when your heart's involved. But paper doesn't. The first document was dated 2006. A wire transfer confirmation. $9,400 bridge loan for their first house. Just a down payment helper. Mom, we'll pay you back with interest. They never did. I remember printing that form out on my old Canon feeling proud, like I was giving my daughter and her new husband a foundation. Back then I believed support meant closeness. I didn't know yet that sometimes giving becomes a quiet burial of boundaries. Flip. 2010. Hospital invoice, pediatric ER. Clara's RSV. Insurance only covered part. $3,150 paid directly to the hospital. Rachel had called me crying. I didn't hesitate. I even drove to Boston that night with soup. Flip. 2012. Private school enrollment deposit. $2,800. We want Clara to have the best start, Mom. Just the deposit. We'll take over the rest. They didn't. The next year's tuition I paid, half. Quietly. Through anonymous donor on the check. Rachel once joked at Thanksgiving. We're so lucky Greg's aunt helped with tuition. I smiled and served the turkey. Flip. 2015, Honda Odyssey repairs, $1,680. Greg's freelance contract fell through. Again. Mom, it's how we take Clara to school. We can't be without it. I paid it before they finished the story. Flip. 2018, emergency babysitting coverage. Rachel had a last-minute business trip. Their sitter bailed. I canceled my doctor's appointment. Drove down 3 hours, stayed 4 nights. She left $40 on the counter for groceries. No thank you note. No call after. It continues like that 2 decades of small erasures in the name of love. Altogether, $61 to $100 in financial support, not counting groceries, gas gifts, or that time I helped pay for Clara's braces under the table. I looked at the last page. A check dated 4 weeks ago. $2,500 marked venue deposit, floral miscellaneous. Rachel had called in that familiar voice, too chipper, too rehearsed. Mom, don't feel pressured or anything, but if you wanted to contribute to the wedding, it would mean the world. I had smiled. Of course, sweetheart. I want to be part of it. And I was. Just not in the way I thought. I closed the folder and held it in my lap. There was no rage, no heartbreak left. Just clarity. They hadn't just forgotten me at the wedding. They'd been slowly uninviting me from their lives for years. The bench was only the final RSVP. I don't remember standing up. I only remember the sound of the folder slipping shut, a soft snap, like a door clicking closed behind me. The next morning, I walked downstairs to the hotel lobby with a coat over one arm and my bag slung across my shoulder. The concierge smiled, asked if I needed a cab. Yes, I said. And can you help me find a law office nearby? Something quiet, old, reliable. He gave me 3 names. I chose the one with the fewest syllables. Baird and Finch Attorneys at Law. It sounded small town enough to take a woman like me seriously. The cab ride was short. The office was tucked between a used bookstore and a dry cleaner. No marble floors. No piped-in music. Just a wooden sign that creaked slightly in the wind and a waiting room with magazines 3 months old. The receptionist looked younger than Clara, but her eyes were kind. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? I'd like to make changes to my estate. Today, if possible. Something in my voice must have cut through the usual protocol, because 10 minutes later, I was seated across from a woman in a charcoal gray blazer who introduced herself as Elaine. She offered coffee. I declined. I needed to speak with a clear mouth. I want to revoke all prior financial arrangements involving my daughter Rachel Greer and her husband. That includes any standing transfers, shared accounts, and access to advisory privileges. Elaine blinked once. Do you have documentation? I have 20 years of it, I said, and set the folder on her desk. She opened it slowly, like someone handling live wires. As she flipped through page after page, checks, notes, emails, wire confirmations, I saw her posture change. Her pen stopped moving. Her eyebrows dipped. This is extensive. It's generous, I corrected, and expired. She looked up. No pity in her eyes, only respect. And who would you like to name in your revised documents? I didn't hesitate. My granddaughter Lily. She's 16, but I want a living trust in place now. For education, healthcare, and housing. She'll need a custodian for now. I'll be that until she's 18. Then she decides. And your daughter. She doesn't need a punishment, I said. She just doesn't need my money. Elaine nodded. Would you like to include a clause preventing contestation? Yes, I said. Put it in writing. If Rachel challenges this, she walks away with nothing. No room for misinterpretation. She clicked her pen twice, then paused. Would you like to include a letter of intent? I thought about that. About Rachel's face when she handed me that lie with lipstick on it. Wait at the bus stop. We'll come back. About the empty bench. The creaking metal. The silence. I smiled faintly. No, I said. She doesn't read what I write anyway. Elaine didn't laugh, but she didn't need to. We spent the next hour going over every detail. When I left, the folder was lighter. Not because the documents were gone, but because the weight of silence had been lifted. Back at the hotel, I didn't cry. I brewed a bitter cup of decaf, using the in-room coffee maker, took a long, slow sip, and stood at the window watching the sun set behind the city skyline. It occurred to me they'd never imagined I had lines I wouldn't let them cross. But now they would know. And it wouldn't come in a scream or a slammed door. It would come in silence. The kind you can't undo. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Not anymore. Anger is loud, hot. It burns fast. What I felt was quieter, heavier, the kind of ache that settles deep into your chest and changes your breathing without you even noticing. I lay in that hotel bed, the one with sheets too white and pillows that never seemed to fit under your neck quite right, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere above me, I imagined there were people dancing, clinking glasses, making toasts, laughing. Rachel's laugh probably rang out the way it always had, high-pitched and performative, the one she uses when she wants to sound like the women she went to grad school with. The version of herself she liked better. The one where I didn't exist. She wasn't always that way. But then again, maybe she was, and I was the one who refused to see it. I raised her alone. Her father left when she was 4, a detail she conveniently forgets every time she talks about how stable Greg's parents' marriage is. I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, taught art in a school that hadn't been painted since Nixon was in office. But we had a home. We had warmth. I made her birthday cake shaped like butterflies. I sewed her Halloween costumes by hand. I kept her piano lessons going even when it meant skipping my own dental appointments. I showed up. Always. I remember once she told me at 12 years old, "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a big house so you never have to worry about anything ever again." I laughed, kissed her forehead, and told her I didn't need a house just for her to come visit on Sundays. Funny how the promises of children evaporate as fast as they're spoken, like chalk drawings on the sidewalk, beautiful, colorful, temporary. At 8:04 the next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Grandma, are you okay? I saw pictures from last night. You weren't in any." My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I typed, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just not invited." Her reply came so fast it startled me. What? I could picture her sitting on the edge of a twin bed in some college dorm room tangled in blankets, her hair in a messy bun, fury blooming behind her eyes. She'd always had that fire, that clarity, not sharp like her mother, but steady, like me. I told her not to worry, that I was handling it, that she didn't need to fix anything. But inside, a plan had already begun to take shape. That evening, I opened my notebook. Not the legal one I'd brought to the lawyer's office, a personal one. The kind I'd used back when I still painted, still cared enough to write ideas down before sleep took them. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What legacy do I want to leave? Not who gets what, but who gets remembered, and why?" I sat with the question for a long time, letting the silence in the room settle over me like a second blanket. Rachel had made it clear I was no longer part of her life except in the ways that were useful, invisible, and silent. But Clara, she called me after every exam. She mailed me postcards from campus with little hearts doodled in the margins. On my last birthday, she sent me a scarf she'd knit herself, lopsided but warm. She never once asked for anything, and that perhaps is why I wanted to give her everything. Not to spoil her, but to plant something solid beneath her feet. A foundation. The kind I never had. The kind her mother forgot. The next afternoon, I returned to Elaine's office. This time, I didn't hesitate at the door. Something had shifted inside me. Not bitterness, not pride, just a quiet resolve. The kind that comes from finally telling yourself the truth and not looking away. Elaine was already waiting, a neat stack of papers on her desk, a pen centered perfectly above them. "I've drafted the updated will," she said. "Rachel and her husband are removed from all designations. Your granddaughter Lily is now the sole beneficiary of the estate." I nodded. No wince, no second thoughts. She'll have full access. At 25, Elaine continued, with limited disbursements prior for education, housing, and healthcare only. "That's what I want," I said. "Help, not indulgence. Roots before wings." Elaine smiled faintly. "Well put." She turned the page. "There's also a clause stating that if Rachel contests the document, she forfeits all rights to any remaining sentimental assets. That includes jewelry, family heirlooms, even photo archives." I raised an eyebrow. "Even the Christmas ornament box." Elaine's lips curled. "Especially the ornament box." I signed each page slowly, carefully. Not like someone drawing a line, more like someone planting a flag. This was the moment I stopped being just someone's mother and returned to being someone in her own right. When it was done, Elaine slid the papers into a folder, sealed it with a brass clip, and handed me a clean copy. "Would you like me to send notice to Rachel?" I paused, then shook my head. "No. Let her wonder. Let the silence do the talking this time, because for years I'd answered every slight with more giving. I'd tried to earn love that should have never needed proving. But now I owed no explanations. No more footnotes for my decisions. Only boundaries. Before I left, I pulled a small box from my purse. Not the trust folder, not the bank documents. The shawl. Still wrapped in its linen cloth. Still smelling faintly of cedar and lavender. "I don't need this anymore," I told Elaine, "but I'm not ready to part with it either." She tilted her head. "May I ask what it is?" I untied the ribbon, unfolded the edges. The lace shimmered in the afternoon light. Thin, intricate hand stitched across generations of women who endured, adapted, survived. "It was meant for Rachel's wedding," I said. "But I believe it still has purpose." Elaine reached out gently, ran one finger along the scalloped edge. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "No," I said. "It's strong. And that's what matters." I folded it back into its cloth, tucked it carefully into my bag, and left the office without looking back. Outside, the air had turned cooler. clouds gathering on the horizon, but I didn't shiver. I walked 3 blocks to a small cafe, ordered chamomile tea, sat by the window. Across the street, a young woman held her baby close as she waited for the crosswalk light to change. She kissed the baby's head, a small, thoughtless motion. But I saw it. And I wondered, will that child remember the kiss, or only feel it later when no one else is kissing her anymore? Will she grow to see love as presence or obligation? And will her mother, like me, someday sit at a window, asking whether what she gave was ever truly received? But then I thought of Lily, and I felt peace. I sipped my tea, pulled out a notepad, and began to write a letter. Not to Rachel, to Lily. Not about money, but about what it took to arrive at this moment. About how love must have roots and rules. About how giving is a gift, not a guarantee. And that no matter how the story began, she gets to write her own ending. The day of the wedding dawned bright and sharp, like irony served on a silver platter. I hadn't been given the time, of course, but I knew it. Lily had let it slip weeks ago in a message that began, "Guess what, Grandma, they're getting married at the Arboretum." Can you believe it? She didn't know then that I wouldn't be on the guest list. I could have stayed in, could have curled under the stiff hotel blanket and let the moment pass like a storm meant for someone else's roof. But I didn't. Instead, I dressed carefully. Not in the rose dress I'd brought for the ceremony that stayed folded in the suitcase, like a letter never sent. No, I wore a soft gray blouse with sleeves to my elbows, black slacks, and my wedding ring. The one I'd never stopped wearing even after Richard died. Not because I was mourning, but because some things you don't take off until you're ready. I hailed a cab. The driver was young, polite, didn't ask questions, just nodded when I said the address. The venue sat at the edge of town behind a row of manicured hedges and an iron gate draped in white chiffon. Balloons, strings of lights, chairs aligned in perfect arcs, all the trappings of joy curated and filtered for photographs. I didn't go inside. I stood across the street under the shade of a jacaranda tree, beginning to bloom early. Purple petals fell like confetti onto my shoulders. I didn't brush them off. In my bag, the shawl rested quietly, still folded, still waiting. Not to be worn, I realized, just to be witnessed. A man passed by with a camera slung over one shoulder. "Wedding?" he asked, not looking at me. I nodded once. Something like that. From where I stood, I could see guests arriving pastel dresses, polished shoes, suits too stiff for summer. Laughter floated across the street, airy and detached. And then I saw her. Rachel. She stepped out of a sleek silver sedan, her veil already in place, face turned slightly from the breeze. She looked perfect, and that's what struck me. Not that I wasn't part of it, but that she'd made it look like I never existed in the first place. She didn't glance toward the street, didn't scan the sidewalk, didn't pause as she walked into the archway of florals I may very well have helped fund. I stood still, my hands by my side, my breath even. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. Because grief, when it's stretched out long enough, becomes something else entirely. It becomes clarity. Rachel hadn't just uninvited me from a wedding. She had slowly rewritten me out of her life like whiteout over an old letter, line by line, until I was only a faint shadow beneath her new script. And now I was watching the final period placed at the end of the last sentence. The ceremony lasted 24 minutes. I know because I counted. Not out of bitterness, but out of awareness. Sometimes the only way to hold on to your dignity is to bear witness, fully awake, to the moment it's denied. The music swelled strings-light piano. Guests stood. I saw the back of Rachel's dress as she walked the aisle, flanked by Greg's mother and father. Not me. Never me. I thought about the time she was 10 and refused to go on stage for the school play unless I was in the front row. How she wouldn't start until she saw my face. Funny how things change. Applause broke out. A wave of sound that never touched me. I stood beneath that blooming jacaranda, the shawl still untouched in my bag, and watched them walk back down the aisle, husband and wife, into a future I wasn't invited to witness. And still I didn't cry. What I felt was something stranger, lighter. A kind of peace that only comes when you've finally stopped running after closed doors. I turned away before the photos began. I didn't need to see them toast with champagne I may have helped pay for. Didn't need to watch her laugh in group shots or pretend to be surprised by the cake. I had already seen what I came to see, that I was no longer part of the picture. And I was finally okay with that. I walked 2 blocks in silence, turned the corner, sat down at the same cafe where I'd written in my notebook 2 days before. Ordered hot tea this time. Earl Grey. I wanted something that tasted real, bitter, and bold. And then my phone rang. Not a text, a call. Lily. I stared at the screen for a moment. Not because I hesitated, but because I felt the shift before I answered. Like a door long swollen shut, creaked open from the other side. I picked up. Grandma. Her voice was tight, worried. I just left the reception. I've been looking for you all day. I swallowed. You didn't see me because I wasn't there. What do you mean? Weren't you invited? The silence between us was soft, not awkward, sacred. No, sweetheart, I said. I wasn't. She inhaled sharply. Did Mom? Did she really? Yes. There was a pause, a long one. I let her sit in it. I had no idea, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. You don't have to apologize for someone else's choice. You're not responsible for what your mother did, only for how you carry what comes next. Another silence. This one heavier. I should have asked, she said. I should have known. You were never meant to be the bridge lily, just the light. I heard her crying softly. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet grief of a girl who just realized the ground beneath her had shifted. I want to see you, she said. Soon. I'd like that, I replied. No, she said, stronger now. I mean, I want to stay close. I don't want this to be just a sad story. I want us to keep going. And in that moment, under the pale cafe awning, with the tea steaming between my hands, I realized something. You don't have to be written into someone's ceremony to still be part of a legacy. You just have to choose where you'll plant the roots next. I flew home 2 days after the wedding. Same suitcase, same airline, but not the same woman. I didn't cry when the wheels left the tarmac. I didn't look out the window hoping someone would call me back. Instead, I sat quietly in my aisle seat, hands folded, heart still, and let the flight carry me forward. Not away from something, but toward someone. Myself. The Minneapolis sky was its usual overcast gray when I landed. It felt honest. The kind of light that doesn't pretend to be something it's not. I liked that. The cab driver didn't ask questions. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain where I'd been or why I was alone. Sometimes dignity sounds like silence. When I stepped inside my house, the same one I've lived in for 34 years, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. But I didn't. I moved through each room like I was meeting it again for the first time. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon oil and memory. My old mixer still sat on the counter, its cord wound too tightly, like always. The faded apron with the embroidered apples still hung on the back of the pantry door. I stood in the hallway for a long time before opening the small drawer that always stuck on the left. Inside was the folder, the one marked Rachel. It had traveled with me. I had read and reread every page on lonely hotel nights, hands trembling with old grief and quiet fury. But now I was ready. I carried it to the shredder, fed each paper in slowly. Transfer receipts, tuition checks, car repairs, floral deposits, the invisible invoices of love that had been mistaken for obligation. The shredder hummed softly, the sound more calming than I expected. This wasn't erasure. It was pruning. What doesn't grow, we cut back so something else might finally bloom. When the last sheet disappeared, I emptied the bin into a brown paper bag and set it by the back door. Not trash. Release. Then I opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside, nestled in linen, still folded with care, was the shawl. The one meant for Rachel. I lifted it gently, ran my fingers along the lace. So much stitching, so much history, and still so much strength. I didn't cry. I didn't fold it back with sadness. Instead, I smiled. That shawl had been worn by women who endured, who buried children, who left wars, who raised families alone and never asked the world to clap. It had done its work. It didn't need a new wedding to prove its worth. And neither did I. I tied it back with its ribbon, placed it in a cloth bag, and slid it to the back of the chest. Maybe one day Lily would want it. Maybe not. That would be her choice. Because this time, everything moving forward would be by choice, not obligation. In the weeks that followed, I began to reclaim small corners of my life. I cleaned out the guest room, the one that used to be called Rachel's room, even though she hadn't slept there in over a decade. I donated the old bedding, boxed up the childhood trophies and dusty college posters. Kept one photo, the one where she was 8, holding a paintbrush, grinning with her teeth missing, not to hold on to what was lost, but to honor the part of her that once loved me without edit. I planted lavender in the front yard, not because it lasts forever, but because it comes back, even after the frost, even after the pruning, and I needed that kind of reminder. Lily came to visit 2 weekends later. She didn't knock like a guest. She walked in like she belonged, and she did. We made grilled cheese on the stove and sat on the porch with chipped mugs of hot cocoa. She told me about her classes, her part-time job, the boy she wasn't sure about. I listened. I laughed. I didn't give advice unless she asked for it. At one point, she leaned back and looked at me. Really looked. "You seem lighter," she said. I smiled. Maybe I am. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for phone calls. Not for apologies. Not for a version of love that required me to shrink. I was living in a house that finally felt like it belonged to the woman who paid for it. I was making cinnamon muffins just because the smell reminded me of Saturday mornings with no one to impress. I was sleeping in clean sheets and letting the silence at night feel like peace instead of punishment. Rachel never called. Not after the wedding. Not after the trust. Not even when Lily told her I knew. And that was okay. Some doors don't need slamming. They need closing, soft, firm, final. I left the shawl in the cedar chest, wrapped in the same ribbon. Lily knows it's there. One day, if she wants it, she'll ask. And if she doesn't, that's her right too. Because I've learned that legacies aren't things we force onto the next generation. They're stories we live so fully that someone else might choose to carry them forward. I sit on the porch now most evenings. Same chair, same view, but not the same woman. Birds gather on the telephone wire. Neighbors wave. The air smells like lavender and warm earth. And I am finally at home. Not in a house, but in myself. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever stood outside someone else's celebration, holding your love like a gift no one asked for, I want you to know something. You are not forgotten. You are not foolish for hoping. And you are absolutely not too late to begin again. Pull up your own chair, light your own candle, wear the shawl anyway. You belong. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs it, and tell me, have you ever had to reclaim your seat at the table? I'd love to hear. This is Eleanor Speaks.